ACDC guitarist and co-founder Angus Young revealed his tense relationship with Bon Scott today, shattering long-held beliefs. Scott represents ACDC's early raw energy with his powerful vocals and personality. Young shows that Scott was talented but disturbed, fascinating yet volatile behind the scenes. Young's frank insights depict a guy whose talent often fought with his demons, a story as dramatic as their music. Think of two young men leading a rock revolution, bringing sheer electricity to every performance, but often locking horns behind closed doors. He calls his relationship with Bon Scott a blessing and a challenge. They captivated fans and drove ACDC to global fame with their stage chemistry. Offstage, Scott's erratic behavior often strained the band. Young recalls many situations where Scott's exuberance caused pandemonium. After a great gig, the band is ready to relax, but Scott disappears into the night, leaving his bandmates to clean up. His constant drinking and impulsivity often clashed with Young, who was more disciplined and focused on ACDC's long-term success. Young said he was unstoppable, but sometimes impossible. When Highway to Hell was recorded, anxiety peaked. Scott's vocals were the album's heart, but his studio antics tried everyone's patience. Conflicts over creative direction, punctuality, and Scott's drinking weakened the band's unity. Young was torn between Scott's genius and its chaos. Bon Scott was ACDC's most active and volatile member, leaving the band on the brink of chaos. Imagine the anxiety Angus and Malcolm Young, two intensely dedicated brothers seeking to push ACDC to global domination, must endure as their charismatic vocalist acts erratically. Scott was more than a lead singer. He was a tornado whose captivating presence could electrify a stadium, but whose unpredictable antics threatened to wreck all they had worked for. Scott's impulsive behavior frustrated drummer Phil Rudd and bassist Mark Evans. Rudd, noted for his steady rhythms and unflappable temperament, often portrayed Scott as a human cyclone that could inspire awe and destroy the next. Image the scene exhausted following back-to-back shows. The band heads to the studio to polish their sound, but Scott arrives late or not at all, smelling of yesterday night's indulgences. Rudd and Evans saw Scott's indifference to rehearsals as a danger to the band's unity. Group tension increased as ACDC's objectives grew. Angus and Malcolm, who created the band's razor-sharp sound, demanded discipline and precision, which contrasted with Scott's carefree style. Scott was brilliant at channeling his wild nature into thrilling performances and scathing, streetwise songs, but he resisted the Young brothers' framework. Imagine Angus, just out of his teens, arguing with Scott, a self-made guy over punctuality and performance quality. Scott's actions also affected the band's management. Managers who had built ACDC's reputation as a no-nonsense rock band struggled to handle Scott's unpredictable conduct. Think of the desperate calls to venues to repair Scott's reputation after his inebriated antics. Scott's charisma was a blessing and a curse for management. He was unstoppable on stage, garnering thousands of admirers. Offstage, he was a ticking time bomb, jeopardizing the band's rising reputation. Despite the hurdles, Bon Scott's unmatched ability kept the band together. Even his sharpest critics in the band couldn't deny that his gruff, soulful voice and lyrical humor drove ACDC's early success. Every missing rehearsal or drunken argument was offset by a song that captured rock and roll's raw vitality and captivated audiences. Scott's impact was huge, forcing the band to reconcile his wild genius with the turmoil it caused. ACDC's early years were defined by conflict under Scott. Their internal difficulties and united vision of rock dominance drove their meteoric development. Scott's chaos was also a catalyst, pushing the band to new heights while testing them. His bandmates' arguments were more than obstacles. They created ACDC's character, creating an intense and distinctive dynamic. Bon Scott's life outside ACDC was a contradiction. He could charm a room but was often preoccupied by his emotions. Imagine a rock star with a contagious smile and incredible appeal, surrounded by fans yet lonely. His problems ever present, despite millions of fans. His tumultuous relationships, addiction, and volcanic temper showed a guy torn between his larger-than-life appearance and his anxieties. Scott's drinking began as a pleasant method to relax after thrilling performances, but became deadly. Ironic that a guy whose voice represented rebellion was undone by his lifestyle. Celebrations with supporters turned into all-night binges, leaving Scott unkempt and emotionally exhausted by morning. Even though the world idolized him, his alcoholism was a crutch to hide his fears and self-doubt. Scott's hardships were revealed during one notorious London night in 1976. His rage and alcohol-induced swagger pushed a minor argument in a packed bar into a battle. Consider the chaos. Bottles breaking, yells erupting, and Scott, his larger-than-life persona, turning darker and more menacing. He appeared as a rock and roll renegade in the media, yet he was a guy unraveling from his excesses. Scott saw these explosive outbursts as pleas for help from a man struggling with issues he couldn't express. Scott has difficult relationships outside of music. His relationships were brief but passionate, with burning highs and tragic lows. Many women were lured to his magnetism and unbridled energy, but they soon found his darker side. His lovers regularly left due to his instability and constant drinking. Imagine a woman fascinated by Scott's charm, losing her heart to the mayhem that surrounded him. These unsuccessful romances made Scott regret and reflect his self-destructive inclinations. Even his loyalists were powerless against his decline. Fans of his talent and wit felt powerless to interfere as he went from brilliant to depressed. Outside the band, Scott lived a life of extremes: passion, heartbreak, celebration, and devastation. His duality inspired others, but also grieved them by the man he could have been if he had overcome his issues. Bon Scott's life outside ACDC was chaotic, and reflected a guy caught between his passion for life and his self-destructive behaviors. His charisma, wit, and talent couldn't protect him from the darker forces that created his story. Each win had a cost, each grin disguised an agony, and each rage revealed a deeper battle. His life outside the band was one of brilliance and tragedy, living at full volume but often on the brink of collapse. In Angus Young's Disclosures, Bon Scott's life is examined, revealing his dual nature as a rock music legend and a troubled person. Every thrilling performance was accompanied with stress, frustration, and sadness that questioned the band's cohesiveness. Scott's tale of achievement and tragedy shows the fine line between genius and self-destruction. His timeless voice symbolizes ACDC's stratospheric ascension, but he struggled with demons that engulfed him. Angus Young's views deepen Scott's legacy, portraying a portrait of a man as multifaceted as his music. Bon Scott's life was as naked and uncensored as his words, a rock star who lived and died his own way. Fans are inspired by his magnificent and heartbreaking legacy, which shows the power of music and the fragility of the human soul.